at the very beginning, and we can get going. So hopefully at the end give you a gift of time if needed. But yeah, thank you for taking the time today. Hopefully you're here for the webinar and question and answer around the MTSS implementation and professional development with technical assistance. A little bit of information about the emailing and videos you received the week before last. So before we get started, do need to go through a few things. I want to let you know that this webinar is being brought to you through the Center for the Improvement of Student Learning at the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. At OSPI, we believe that each student needs to be prepared for post-secondary pathways, career, and civic engagement. We are driven to transform a K-12 education system that is centered on closing opportunity gaps and characterized by high expectations for all students and educators. We believe that we achieve this by developing equity-based policies and supports that empower educators, families, and communities. We aspire to have all of our work be driven by our values, ensuring that equity, collaboration, and service, achieving excellence through continuous improvement, and focusing on the whole child. And through our efforts, we are striving to go beyond equality, to think about the opportunities we have to examine and dismantle current policies and practices that result in disparate outcomes for our students, and the ultimate goal of ensuring that each student has access to instruction and support that will make them successful in school and in life. We want to acknowledge historical context and engage our students and families and communities and partners in decision-making because they possess the strength and cultural knowledge to do that which will transform our schools. And finally, I want to pause for a tribal land acknowledgement. For those of you who might be in the Olympia area, I am not right now, we'll get to that in a minute. We acknowledge that that part of this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Squaxin Island tribe, descendants of the maritime people who lived and prospered along the shores of the southernmost inlets of the Salish Sea for untold centuries. We ask that participants of this meeting honor the tribal lands on which each of you are located today, on the lands of those tribes located on the coast, to the tribes of the Central Plateau, to those along the Columbia, Spokane, and other rivers, and to those living in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. We acknowledge the commitment of all Pacific Northwest tribes in the resurgence of their traditional ways and their respect and protection of all people. Not only those who are living, but those who have gone before and those who are yet to be born. We pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, and to the valued resource of the tribes, have defined as their children. They are the tribe's future. And I would like to recognize that I am coming to you from the traditional lands of the Suquamish, Muckleshoot, Duwamish, Still-Guamish, and the Coast Salish tribes. If you do want to take a moment and post in the chat where you might, which tribal lands you may be currently on, that would be fantastic. So now we can talk a little bit about our time today. So getting into our work today, we will have a brief overview of our MTSS Scale Up effort in Washington State, talk a little bit about our cohort model that we're putting forth, and a description of that professional development and technical assistance within that cohort model. And part of that we'll talk briefly about our regional implementation coordinators. In addition, at the end, we'll talk about the application process to be part of that cohort and potential future cohorts. And then at the very end, there'll be time for some general questions and answers. Throughout today, if you do have questions, and they come up in the chat, we will do our best to answer them in real time in the chat. There's a few folks here supporting us today, and at different times in today's presentation, we will pause to answer some of those that can't be answered in the chat or need to be elaborated on beyond the chat if it makes sense then. But know that if it is an elaborate answer or a longer answer we need to provide, it might have to wait till the end of the webinar piece. And again, we are recording this. So if you do have to leave early or you came late and you missed something at some point, or you need to share with a colleague, it will be linked to the OSPI website as soon as we can get transcription and all of that settled down with it. So I also want to acknowledge that we have a few folks from our OSPI team in the room today, and there may be more. I'm not watching the chat or the participant list right now, but From your Center for the Improvement of Student Learning team with us today, Maria Flores, who is our Executive Director of CISL, has joined us today. Justin Poulos, the Director of MTSS, is with us today. Mark McKechnie, the Senior Consultant for Equity and Discipline. I am RJ Monton. I'm the Assistant Director of MTSS, and Stella has joined us, and she's in the background making sure everything goes right. She's our administrative assistant. So I want to talk a little bit about Washington's MTSS framework. It is an so what we're scaling up to is an evidence-based organizational approach for districts and schools to create those equitable, consistent, and flexible systems and supports that empower educators, students and families, and communities to ensure that every student benefits. Our MTSS framework builds on that public health approach that is preventative and focuses on really organizing the efforts of adults within these systems. MTSS ensures that students benefit from those nurturing environments and they have equitable access to those universal instruction and those supports that are culturally and linguistically responsive. In addition, they're universally designed and differentiated to meet those students' unique needs. And within Washington State, we're focusing on those 5 core elements of that team-driven leadership, database decision-making, making sure that family, student, communities are engaged with our process, that tiered continuum of supports, and making sure that we are using evidence-based practices and have a model to select those said evidence-based practices. So one of the things about our MTSS Scale Up is, we're really trying to take an approach that it's an unsiloed effort. And what I mean by that is we're focusing on MTSS not being an initiative by itself. And we are we're working to become the dreaded one more thing sort of cliche within things. So really at OSPI, we're working across departments to make sure we're not trying to fit everyone's practice necessarily into a framework, but really taking that framework and taking those practices and bringing them to everyone's area of expertise to emphasize that MTSS is more about the process, more about how we go about doing our work rather than what we're going to tell you to do within your work. So within all of these other pieces, whether it's school climate all the way down to lab, thinking about the idea that okay, these are all areas of expertise. With MTSS, we're going to look at common practices within these so that we can dovetail our efforts together and capitalize on strength of the whole rather than the individuals within it. And on top of that, in order to have these positive student outcomes at the very end of our efforts, we need to really focus on this cascading model of supports. So we know that the goal is implementation at the building level to provide for students. But we know that good implementation of systems and the building level really relies on those district supports. And we know that district supports then rely upon those regional supports and all the way up to the state level. So here we are before you, talking about our state framework and how we're going to scale this up and across the state within the idea of taking okay, we're at the state level now, we're going to work down towards regional levels to support within your district regions or your ESDs, and then to the district level and to the building level. And that's what our scale up effort is really about. So, and what that looks like as far as the focus of each of our work. So at the higher we go, and I mean that by the state level, so that the higher our elevation of view, the more on the focus of the implementation or that infrastructure support has to be. So really our focus is to reduce barriers, to provide that technical assistance, to provide access to quality PD for regional and districts, and work with the regions and the districts to set up internal processes to build capacity. So it's, we're really focusing on allowing that process to happen and pulling forth the professional development technical assistance to get it to happen, and setting districts up to provide for their own buildings. So the further you get away from state level work, the more it focuses on those individual teacher practices. And one thing, so I do want to talk about the money aspect of all of this really briefly. So you're probably asking yourselves, how is this all how is this all being funded? And as much as myself or Justin or Mark or Maria, any one of us would love for a giant bucket of money for MTSS implementation or scale up to be there, the reality is it's not. So we've got to be creative and braid some of our funding together to provide a holistic and comprehensive effort around professional development and technical assistance. So right now, the way our efforts are funded, some of the funding is coming through OSEP, through the Office of Special Education Programs, through the State Personnel Development Grant. And that's the recent add of money. And what that's providing is some of our statewide positions for that technical assistant and some of that time to develop the professional development for districts to access. Already sort of in play are the Department of Ed Climate Transformation Grant districts that are already kind of working through some of that. And that's in line with our efforts. So know that that is another funding stream that's coming. And then finally, there's state funds being put in through legislative packages that have helped support the potential for some more positions and professional development, the development of PD for districts. So know that like we're taking all of these funds and kind of braiding them together so that when you approach or when you apply into our cohort model, it doesn't, one district kind of in the background might be paid for by one might be paid for by another, but know that like the end result, the quality professional development technical assistance to districts is all coming to the same program. We're in the background trying to make sure the money continues to support not only the current implementation, but the scale up efforts as well. And the way our cohort model, the way we've planned out our cohort model, and the way we see it looking is, within this first year, coming into 21-22 school year, is when we're looking at that first district level cohort to join into our scale up efforts. And the reason for that, if we think back to our cascading models of support, we're doing professional development with our statewide team, developing our internal training capacity, to then bring to the ESDs and districts. So we're pulling in that district level cohort as the very beginning. We're going to work with your districts to set up processes and set up teaming models and set up decision pathways to move MTSS implementation forward in your districts. So then during the second year of cohort one, you can see on our screen that that effort then scales down to begin supporting the buildings within the district. And at the same time, we bring on cohort two at the district level. And you notice that, you never see cohort one fall off of our cascading model here. And the reason for that is, Justin and I and a few others have been making this joke that, we're using sort of the Hotel California approach to MTSS implementation in Washington State. Like, doesn't matter what door or window you come in through, but kind of once you're in and you're receiving that professional development and technical assistance, we're not going to abandon you. We're going to keep making you whole. We're going to keep providing you, with that support. It may not be with the level of intensity during your first year, but it's sort of that gradual release as we go on. And we know that at times we may have to push back in, to provide some more like higher level support depending on how things go in your district and statewide. So as we move forward, know that the year one is primarily focused on the district level, year two primarily focused on the school level, but then as we scale back, it's that access to professional development and technical assistance does continue. So I'm going to pause, and I don't know if Justin or Mark, I know you're watching the chat. Is there anything that any big questions, at least at this point, that we should jump into?
No, nothing in the chat.
Okay. So when I'm talking about professional development and technical assistance, many of you are probably saying like, okay, what does that look like? Explain to me like what would happen as we join this first cohort. So in thinking of, when we look at like professional development, we're kind of breaking it down into a couple tiers. Really, we're looking at sort of the first level that most districts in cohort one would be accessing would be the statewide, sort of like we'll call it the full cohort model. And some of that would be synchronous and asynchronous, two words we didn't really use a whole lot of prior to about 18 months ago, but approximately 6 sessions during the school year. And those sessions will be kind of tied to those areas of the school year when we know that, okay, we can pull district leadership teams in. We know that things have maybe calmed down a little bit in district. So, we're going to avoid some of those busier times, like right before the holiday break or right before, the summer. So we're going to avoid those times when we know districts are inundated with a bunch of other work, and try and access district level teams when they're available. So looking at 6 sessions throughout the school year, and that'll be delivered by your statewide team. So those of us at OSPI and the regional coordinators attached to each ESD, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. The other level of professional development that will be available would be sort of this like cohort professional development. And some of this will be targeted towards common, these common targeted areas, and we'll know those areas once districts begin the process, because one of the things we'll be asking all districts to engage in is a fidelity instrument of some sort. So whether they're using the district capacity assessment or the district's systems inventory, so the DSFI or the DCA, and what that will tell us is that'll help us identify some districts who might have some similar problem of practice or some similar implementation hurdles they're looking at. And those are districts that we'd like to pair up or put into groups to develop these professional learning groups to benefit from some combined PD. So using the expertise of regional coordinators from different parts of the state to kind of come together, put together some combined PD specifically for a few districts who might be looking at some of the same struggles with their implementation. So there's that sort of like that level of professional development. We'll call it the tier 2 level, so to speak. So statewide would be the universal, everyone gets it. Like cohort is more the tier 2 kind of targeted support. And then we're going to look at sort of like that really targeted, that individualized district level professional development. And that'll be, so each of your districts being part of an ESD will have a regional coordinator to access for that technical assistance and that individualized professional development. And this will be, you'll develop what's important in that professional development with your local coordinator. So that's, again, now that tier 3 really individualized professional development. So those are kind of the 3 levels we're thinking is what the professional development will look like coming out of the gates. And you're probably asking, like, what's the content of that going to be? So we know we have these, within the DCA or the DSFI, or even the tiered fidelity inventory at the building level, we know that there's standards that we would then teach to. So that would be the high standard for the state level information being delivered in professional development. But then looking at that like cohort and that targeted will really depend on where your individual district is at with regard to like levels within those fidelity measures or on any other instrument. And this is sort of a visual of kind of what we imagine it looking like. So we know, in best practice that PD alone does not change implementation efforts. So every time our intention is that every time there is a professional development opportunity, it's quickly followed by direct technical assistance from your regional implementation coordinator. So whether it's at the state levels, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, your local coordinator would then provide sort of like local context on how that then affects your implementation plans. Same thing with that targeted cohort professional development, quickly followed by direct technical assistance from your regional coordinator to make it very applicable within your district. And then obviously that district level PD is developed in conjunction with your local coordinator so that will be very applicable right away. So again, statewide PD would be delivered by state team and local coordinators collaborating. Targeted would be local coordinators collaborating, probably some statewide team support, and then district level would be with your local coordinator. And then sort of since all of our efforts, let me back up one. So this is the year 1 sequence, and all of those efforts are primarily, they are directed at the district level. Going back to that cascading model support, in order for buildings to have a successful implementation phase, districts have to be ready to support them with some internal capacity. So year one sequence, like I was saying, will be focused at that district level. Beyond year one, if you've looked at any of the materials we sent out, we anticipate that buildings will end up entering their MTSS implementation through one of three channels. So either that early childhood channel, the academic systems channel, or the social, emotional, and behavioral channel, the PBIS channel. And within that, so within the pyramid model, that early childhood model, the University of Washington would be supporting the professional development, and we would be kind of in the background with the scale up and the coaching of that. So they'll be the primary delivers of that information. And then academic systems would be the other modality with which a building could enter the professional development. And that we're hoping is conjunction with some of our ELA coordinators and our local, our regional coordinators to work in conjunction with them using something called the reading TFI, so the reading tiered fidelity inventory, using that as far as to set up the structures and relying on local ELA coordinator expertise in the science of teaching of the reading. So, and then finally, the PBIS piece, the positive behavior interventions and supports, that would be with our our local coordinators and statewide team developing the professional development and the technical assistance around that. So year one, again, is that district level. Year two is that building level. And it would, the one thing that I should say is it would be pretty hypocritical of us if we are advocating for MTSS implementation and not using sort of an MTSS lens ourselves. So one thing that we'll keep a keen eye on is how implementation is going during that first year and how the PD cycles and the technical assistance cycles are going. And we would adjust accordingly if needed. So if we're seeing that, like, okay, we can speed up, we can slow down, or like, no, we need to focus more on this, we're going to allow the data and the feedback that we're getting during that first cohort year to help us adjust for the year two of cohort one and potentially year one of cohort two moving forward. And returning to this cycle to put context back into it. So again, starting with those 2-year direct technical assistance cycles for cohort one and cohort two as well, and then so on for 3 and 4. Again, noticing that once you're in the house of MTSS in Washington, you never get to leave. So
RJ,
the next question you're probably thinking is, oh, was there a question mark?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat from Rebecca Kim. Are there required reporting or deliverables from districts to participate in the cohort? It's the first question. And you can address that one. I'll read the second one.
Yeah, so yes is the answer. So we'll be asking districts to use one of those fidelity measures, whether it's the district capacity assessment or the district systems fidelity inventory. And that would be not only your baseline measurement of where you are, but also your progress monitoring tool. So we'd be asking for some information sharing on that, as well as some student outcomes. And looking at disproportionality data as one of those. We would ultimately, with all of MTSS implementation and scale up, we're looking for more increased positive outcomes for students, increased access for those groups that are typically marginalized, and looking at reducing some of those opportunity gaps. So we would be expecting, and there would be an agreement necessary to share some of that data with us to look at progress overall.
And I'll just add to that as well that I think our goal is to make it as much as possible to use data that's already being collected and probably just make it more accessible to for the district teams to use and to access generally. And then the second question is how many district team members are typically on that district leadership team, and are there certain recommended positions that they should represent?
Yes, so that the exact number is hard to say because that's going to depend on district size, and but as far as the typical positions that are on there, definitely so the district level team, you want some policy influence on the team. So I mean, I would say most of your administrative cabinet would be helpful to be on the team. I mean, superintendent would be ideal. And I think, someone who has, access to influence over, policy and funding decisions. I think when it comes down to it, and sorry, let me back up one more would incredibly important piece is someone who has access to data systems or ability to influence data systems. Those folks are instrumental in the development of some of these teaming models and the systems within the district. So go back one more. So technical assistance and what that looks like within the districts or within the support model. So the technical assistance will be provided by your regional implementation coordinator. And there will be one attached to each ESD. And in that, like I was saying before, in that first year of our cohort model, they will be focusing on the teaming, district level teaming and processes, and ultimately with the goal of building capacity to continue to support the rollout to the building level. So we are fully aware that 9 folks plus a few from OSPI are not enough to provide technical assistance to every single district at the same time in Washington State. So it's really that scale up effort to take that higher level expertise and then transfer it to the district level and provide coaching on how to further enhance that internal capacity. Beyond that year one, that focus will shift to the building level from the regional implementation coordinators, and that'll continue that internal capacity building, but it'll be sort of like that. We're not going to close the door on district level support. We know that there's fine tuning that always needs to happen, but what will happen is it'll be a fated manner because the priority during that year 2 is at that district rollout. And overall, through the course of everything, it's going to be a gradual release. The idea that as you train up internal expertise, you need that external expertise less frequently and just more targeted. So that is what the technical assistance will look like. And the content of that, again, is going to depend on the nature of what we're finding in your data and what we're finding in the fidelity measures that you're using. And then who are your regional implementation coordinators? So some of them are here with us today. So in 101, Stephanie Dietrich has joined us. In 105, that is still to be determined. Selena Adelson Journey is in 112. Tammy Woodard is in 113. ESD 114, we're still to be determined there as well. In 121 is Tori Hazelton Schneider. 123 is Kelly Bolson. 171 is Stephanie Andler, and 189 is Abby Trimble. So we have it, and I will say that I've been working with all of them for it feels like a long time now, but it's only been the past maybe like 6-7 weeks. And in some of the work we've been doing, I am thoroughly impressed that we have a team that has a diverse set of experiences and backgrounds, and I'm confident that we can provide for a statewide scale up effort with the folks that we have working with us. So it's every day I'm impressed by the questions that are being asked and by the ideas being tossed out. So I'm happy with where we're at, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting 2 more to join the team soon to support those districts or those ESDs. So the primary role of the regional implementation coordinator really is kind of what I've been talking about so far, engaging in that statewide implementation network, working with each other, being able to complement each other's skill sets to bring good professional development to districts and to ESDs, as well as helping with the statewide framework. Building relationships with districts. I mean, our efforts behind the funding in our model is to provide somebody outside of your district to provide that technical assistance at no cost to you, essentially, to help with your scale up and efforts within your district. And then supporting those districts in establishing training and implementation plans. We know sometimes, being in the thick of it, having come from a district, it's tough to set aside that time for that strategic planning when you're in the middle of it. So having someone outside, sort of one step removed, able to sort of help frame, the plan moving forward is really helpful. Again, and much like, at OSPI, how we're working with across departments to do, some MTSS implementation at the ESD, the intention is that the regional implementation coordinators can also provide some of that alignment and capacity across departments, so that rather than trying to create one giant triangle with everyone's name on it and figuring out where everyone's at, sort of working laterally to get these processes and practices become natural habits of different departments. And then providing that training, that PD, like we talked about, and then again, that technical assistance. Additionally, because we know that we do our best work and we have the best student outcomes when we look at progress, and we monitor progress closely, and we look at not only our outcomes but our fidelity measures. The regional coordinators are going to be part of that team that's collecting and analyzing, sharing some data on that implementation. So looking at it at a regional level, a state level, and a local district level. And then, like I said, looking at those like cohorts, building those opportunities for regional collaboration. There may be a district in 101 that's struggling with the same problem of practice as a district in 112, and it would make sense for them to collaborate, have that professional learning group within districts, and share some ideas. And again, as part of this multi-tiered and this cascading model of supports, facilitate that communication along local partners. So partners within this chain and partners statewide that may be private entities that provide some PBIS or MTSS support, facilitate some of that communication on the expertise that exists statewide. And again, return to this cascade model of supports because we know that we want to have, we want to be able to demonstrate positive improvements in outcomes for students. We know that trickle down effect happens, beginning at the state level. But if we look at our efforts targeting the district leadership team, that then sets up supports for the school leadership teams to be successful during their implementation phase, and allows school staff to be successful as well. So everything ends up being that cascading model of supports, but it relies on having a solid state framework, regional support, and then that solid district implementation effort. So I'm going to,
there's another question from Rhonda Larson asking about how much time are we talking about for MTSS coordination. So I think we probably want to talk about the role of the district leader as well as the leadership team.
So how much time specifically? So that is I'll be honest, that's a hard question to answer right now. But I will say that it does require time. And I think that's going to depend on again, the size of the district and the efforts that your team needs to put forth. So to put an actual hour amount of time on it, that's a tough thing to answer right now. But looking at the PD sessions will probably be hour and a half, 2 hours max. And the technical assistance sessions will probably be about the same. So I would say if you're looking at budgeting time, estimate maybe 2 hours a week to district level team effort on this as a team with whether it's PD or technical assistance that's happening. So if that's 2 hours a week, that's what, and my math is correct, 8 hours a month roughly. I would say at minimum. Was there another question? No.
That was it so far.
Yeah. So briefly, want to talk about the application process and the timeline now. So you were sent out some materials. There was a PDF that came out. There was a video explaining a little bit more, and I believe each you should have received or already received probably some communication from your local ESD with a video that introduced your regional coordinator, as well as some additional information about the application process. But it's a two-part process. So the first part being sort of we used to call it paper, but it's a digital application where it's in the form of a survey. It's on the OSPI MTSS webpage. The link is there. I think we'll put it in the chat as well. And it's, you go in and there's some questions to answer. And really what we're looking for is a level of commitment and readiness. So you enter the information into there. We'll take a look at it at the state level. And again, like I said, we're looking for that willingness to implement. You know, it sounds like a funny thing to say, but like, yeah, we're looking for a commitment from a district leadership level to put this as a priority for, you know, your team to work on. We're looking for a dedicated leadership team. That doesn't mean you have to create something new. I think George Sagai would say, like, don't create any new team. You don't have to, but if you already have a leadership team, this becomes a charge, and maybe you need to round out some positions on that team to make sure you have all the requisite stakeholders at the table. So that dedicated leadership team and some dedicated personnel time. So, you know, with things like the development and the use of data systems and looking at processes and meeting protocols, like making sure we have some personnel that have some dedicated time to work on this. And a willingness to adopt a data and fidelity system. So it's okay, like it's, you know, when we look at readiness for implementation, it's sort of like this weird thing, like you show up and be like, we don't have anything, but we're willing to spend the money and do it. Like that, to some degree, that's readiness. So if there's a willingness to adopt a system and there's funds set aside to make sure that that system can be adopted, you know, that demonstrates that willingness. And then finally, that data sharing agreement, like we were talking about before, because we're not going to embark on any sort of implementation effort without first having a plan on how to measure it, or how we're going to know whether we're doing it right or doing it well. So based on that, we'll take a look at that at the state level, say like, okay, like, you know, District A, yep, looks like a great candidate, and then we'll set up an interview. And really, the interview is sort of it's a mutual interview where, as much as we're checking, you know, in on, you know, are these commitments true? Are you willing to engage in some of these things or all these things? Also being able to explain further what we can do for you, making sure that it's a mutual fit. We don't want districts engaging in something that like, oh, it's not quite what we thought. We're not ready for this. So we want to make sure that it's a mutual fit at this time for your district and for the technical assistance and professional development that we can put forth. And based on that, we kind of see two pathways. So one would be that what we've been describing so far, that professional development and direct technical assistance. It is that multi-year commitment to the data sharing and making sure that you're setting aside the time as a team to develop or to attend professional development and partake in the technical assistance. That's the one we've been talking about. That would be sort of like the ideal pathway. The other pathway is sort of like, okay, hey, like maybe this is like, from a district standpoint, we can't devote the time yet to this. We're really interested, but maybe like we need to adjust some things maybe next year. Okay. One of the things that we're not going to do is we're not going to hide professional development. Once we have it, we're going to record as much as we can and make as much of it available, to anybody who wants to attend the professional development. What that won't have necessarily is that direct technical assistance. So, we're not going to hide the PD that we're in the knowledge that we have. It'll be available, but we won't be able to provide necessarily the direct technical assistance unless you're part of that cohort. So those are the two sort of pathways you could end up in after application. And just so we're all aware of the timeline, so materials were all released on June 2nd. And then today is the 10th, so we're having the application informational webinar. By July 2nd, that's when we're going to kind of close the application window. So make sure we have time to review it before we make our final decisions and have all of our final interviews. So, and beginning on the 3rd was the window when we would set up interviews. As applications come in, we'll review them. We'll reach out to districts to set up the interview if appropriate and schedule that time with you. So that interview would be with OSPI staff as well as your local ESD staff. And then by August 2nd, we should have all the applicants notified who would be part of that cohort 1. And then trying to be sensitive to understanding how school districts run, having come from one. I know that August and September are super busy times, and I imagine this August and September to be even busier, given that we're returning to a greater sense of normalcy. So looking at beginning that professional development TA on or around October 1st, the beginning of October, when we have a little bit more breathing room from school reopening, and district level teams can begin to sit down and begin going through the process at their level.
RJ, there was another question about who would we expect to be there from the district for the interview?
So the folks that you would have on your district leadership team. So somebody with some policy influence, someone with some financial influence, your district leadership, your folks from cabinet, and some folks with that database or that data technical ability. So just really quick to recap and provide a little bit of other information. We talked about the overview of the Scale Up effort, went into the cohort model, and hopefully did a pretty good job of describing the professional development and the technical assistance, as well as the role of the regional implementation coordinators and the application process. I do want to call out one other pieces out there, because I did get a few emails about this and I've got a few questions about the AIMS, or the Administrators Improving MTSS grant. This is not, I hate to say it's not part of what we're doing, but this is another opportunity or resource that's out there. And the focus of this grant is looking at district and school administrators and really looking at enhancing their leadership abilities within MTSS. I believe the application window closes the 17th. Is that correct, Justin? Yeah. So it does close soon, and that cohort begins in October, and it's again targeted specifically at administrators and to build their knowledge and abilities around MTSS. Bill Resplica is leading that effort. He would be the contact, and his email address is there. And while I would say that this is, Justin and I have been in contact with Bill. We've been chatting with him about how, our efforts and, the AIMS project, like how they line up. And there are some areas where it dovetails very nicely. And I think, one of the things I want to point out is if your district is part of, this cohort, that does not preclude you from being able to be part of cohort 1 within our statewide scale up effort. Like it's not one or the other. You can be in both. And one thing we'll have to work with the regional coordinators to make sure that when we're moving through these processes, that we're making sure that the things are in line. So yeah, just wanted to make sure that you understood that this was something a little bit different, but at the same time know that, we're doing our best to work directly with Bill to line up our efforts. And I know there's some of your districts may be involved with some inclusionary practices work. Again, that doesn't preclude you from being part of this. That would be, I think those are all things that we can work with you to actually help enhance your MTSS implementation within your district. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop sharing. And I don't know any other orderly way to do this other than just, we can ask some questions, and we'll do our best to answer them right now. Again, like I continually joke, I did briefly teach middle school, so I can wait.
RJ, this is Rachel Dixon.
Hey, Rachel.
I have a question. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Hey, my question just is with the timeline for the interviews, I'm moving districts next year, and so this is actually one of our focuses. And so I'm just curious if the entire team isn't available for the interview, because July is a lot of vacation time. Is there a minimum number of people that could be part of the interview?
I would say just get as many as you can get there.
Okay.
I mean, we're fully aware that, this July is like super July, like
Mm.
everyone, you know, everyone is trying to take the time. And I think even at our statewide team, like we understand like, okay, like we're all trying to, we have lives, we're trying to balance too. So yeah, I would say is just try and get as many folks as you can there to the interview. That would be ideal.
Okay, thanks, RJ.
Yeah. Okay, so I am seeing some questions in the chat.
I have a question about, is there a required data collection method or module on the technology side, or can we use our own systems?
If I would say if your systems, if your current systems can measure fidelity and student outcomes, then we can use current systems. I would say if it wasn't able to measure that, you weren't able to pull out, you know, student cohort information, then we might have to look at enhancing it somehow. Sorry for the gray answer, but
Well,
The
and I
bottom
could add
line
just,
is we won't require a specific one. Sorry, Mark.
yeah, I agree. And I would just add that I think from what I've observed, sometimes what is needed is a user interface to allow the team to get the data that's already in this student information system. So not every district has their student information system set up to make dashboards and other data readily accessible. So that might be the missing piece. But again, we're not requiring one product or one system.
I apologize if I missed this earlier. This is Rhonda Larson from Auburn School District. Good afternoon. Thanks for holding this session. How many districts are you looking to bring into the fold for your first cohort?
so that's a really great question. I think that's a bit of a moving target for us, Rhonda. I think, you know, originally we were looking at like, hey, we'd love like 20 to 30 districts, but that's going to depend on a number of factors, because if all 20 districts are out of, you know, ESD 121, that's, you know, that's not equitable. Sorry, Tori. I think it's going to be that balance of like, you know, where are the districts coming from? How big are the districts that are applying, you know, and at what level of commitment and readiness are there? So I think we could go as high as 30. I think we were looking at like, it'd be great if we had 20 per year as this cohort went on. I think that's what we could maintain our professional development and capacity and technical assistance capacity with. But I think beyond 30 gets us into sort of like, okay, like we imagine there'd be a diminishing quality in the PD and the technical assistance. So I will, if folks don't have more questions right now, I can definitely put my email into the chat. And, you know, if you have questions beyond this, or you think of something later, you're like, oh, I should have asked that. Definitely feel free to send an email. And if it's something that I can answer via email, I will. If not, we can set up a quick phone call or something else. But let me put my email into the chat. I'm not one of those people who can talk and type at the same time, so I apologize. But if there are no questions, you know, feel free to enjoy the rest of your Thursday afternoon. I can hang out for a while longer. I don't know if anybody from the ESD teams can, or Justin, if you have something else, you're like, oh, hey, I'm thinking of this, or thought about this. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for listening. Again, if you do have questions, go ahead and email.
Can I stick around to ask a question?
Yeah.
Should I go? Should I
Yeah.
ask?
Sorry. Yes.
Okay. I'm sticking around because I don't want everyone to have to hear like a singular question that I have. But maybe it will benefit people that are sticking around. So we are eager and excited about the opportunity. Also, MTSS is an area of work that we are refreshing the vision and the guiding principles that are research-based. I work in Highline.
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking about the trajectory of like the cascading supports visual, where you start with the district leadership team first, but we know that school leadership has been asking for some really specific direction around MTSS. We have a new literacy adoption for elementary and secondary, so we want to leverage that opportunity to identify places for differentiation. So I'm just wondering if, because we're starting to hit go, and in August we're going to engage school leaders with refreshing the vision, talking about how our SIS, which is Synergy, has an MTSS module. I happen to support data and assessment department as well, so there's just a lot of connections. And I'm just wondering if we want to be doing these things side by side with district and school leadership, are the rules really strict that I wouldn't be able to I don't want to spend your time and my time through the application interview process if we can't be thinking about the work being aligned with district and school leadership, because that's where we are now, and that's really where we need to be for our kids, and not have to wait a couple of years to get to the school leadership piece of the work.
No, I mean, that's a great question. And I may ask Justin to kind of chime in a little bit on this one. But yeah, so I think, I wonder, I mean, I think it might still be beneficial to go through like the application. I mean, I think, I wonder, because, if Highline has a higher level or a greater degree of readiness, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's, I think some of that targeted PD and that like cohort PD you might still benefit from at the district level.
Mhm.
It sounds like maybe you have some plans within the district to do some work with buildings. So I wonder if there's a way that you internally could run it parallel if needed.
I think that's
I'd be happy to if you guys said it wasn't a no.
yeah, we're not saying you can't do anything at the school level. What our focus of support next year will be at the district level.
Got it.
And really building that district level capacity so that the district is able to be doing that school level support as effectively and efficiently as possible. So we're not saying like, don't do any work at the school level at all by any means.
Okay, that's super helpful. Okay, we have a lot of learning to do as a system and calibration. So I'm eager. So we have the readiness and the eagerness, but we're not there. Yes.
Rebecca, you're not alone. And I think we've been looking at the reopening plans, and I mean, everyone's kind of there. And so, Anne has indicated that they want to do MTSS, but from what we've seen, it's a whole continuum of kind of where they're at. So definitely would encourage you to apply.
Okay. Okay, don't forget our name and Highline.
I won't. No,
Okay.
it's my next. I live in West Seattle. It's my next door neighbor.
Okay, don't forget us.
I got you, Rebecca.
All right.
Rebecca, I super appreciate you asking that question, because we know that district plans are stronger when they engage our buildings from the start. And so I was too thinking, right now with our inclusion project, we have a high school, middle, and elementary administrator on board. And I think those people would be the perfect people to continue to help us with our district level decisions and design around MTSS. So
Mhm.
thanks for bringing that in.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm off to another meeting. Thanks for letting me take that airtime. Appreciate it.
Well,
course.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so I guess if there's no other questions, we can adjourn. We can stop recording probably.